I'm Marshall Shannon with Ministry Design Concepts. Thank you for joining our webinar today on basic characteristics of churches by size, and this is part 2. We want you to understand that we're answering 10 questions. We've answered the first 5 questions about church characteristics and the very nature of church. What is the church's orientation? How is the church structured? Who sets the direction of the church? Who is the pastor's or what is the pastor's role in the church? How are decisions made in the church? And today we're going to talk about the following 5 questions. What is the place of staff in the church? How does change take place in the church? And how do churches grow? What are the obstacles to growth? And what are the strategies for growth? I gave the illustration in part 1 about my sister who purchased a quarter horse while she was in high school and learned to barrel race with her horse Jockatan. She understood the very nature, the characteristics, and the qualities of her particular horse, but she also had to gain an understanding of the very nature of horses, what startles them, what calms them down, what helps them perform at peak performance as she went through the competition and the barrel racing, how she fed them, groomed them, exercised them, protected them, and provided for them to gain the most, to maximize the effectiveness and efficiency of the horse's competition. And as she did that, she learned some tough lessons. And so when it comes to pastors, as we shepherd and lead and manage and care for people, that we need to understand church in North America. So there is a set of normal characteristics that are found in churches, and it's both by our study and research and observation that we pick up on these things. So as we go through this, these are not just my observations, but the observations of numerous of others who have helped to put together these thoughts so that we can understand church as we go to lead and manage it. And so let's address the first question. What about staff? How do we staff our churches to help the church grow? Because how we staff the church depends a great deal on whether the church declines or plateaus or grows. And so I want you to think of the 3 different size churches: small, medium, and large. Small is 200 and under, medium is 200 to 400, and large is 400 and up. I want you to think of them as a duet, a quartet, and an ensemble, depending on the size of the church. And so church is a team sport, I believe, and so is leadership, and it needs to be staffed to grow. Matter of fact, a good book for you to read on church as a team sport is a book by Jim Putman with that title. And so as you look at this, I want you to note first off that churches are staffing their small churches with usually a single pastor, and he may be bivocational, means he is working a full-time or part-time job and pastoring the church. But just as a rule of thumb, and good men disagree over the following numbers, but for every 150 people that are attending your church, not membership, but attending your church, 150 people, you have 1 full-time staff person. Now, you may find that you could do it at 75 to 125 or 100 people that you have attending your service. A lot of that is contextualized to the finances, the giving, and the situation you have at your church. But for the normal characteristic or the nature of a small church, with 150 people, you're going to have 1 full-time pastor, and then a secretary, a support staff, full-time or part-time. Now, as you go through this, you can write up a chart as I speak. So 1 to 150 people in a church is one full-time pastor. 151 to 300 people is 2. 300 to 150 is 3. So as you add a staff person, you're looking at how many people. 150 people, as you add them, you can safely look at it having another full-time pastor on staff. Now, we move from that to medium churches, and you have the pastor and a small staff. So if a small church is defined as having 200 to 400 people, you're going to have 2 to 3 pastors, or in other words, a small staff, on that group. And then large churches, you're going to have multiple staff and support staff who are a part of this. And so as you go through this, let me encourage you, how do you approach staffing? And it can be a struggle, because if you wait and you are reactive to growth, in other words, you staff after your growth happens, now you're behind it. Instead, I would encourage you to staff to grow. Be proactive instead of reactive to growth. And number 2 about this is to set your priorities in a way that will help your church grow, so that your church family is more favorable to adding staff when they understand why you're doing it the way you're doing it. Because often you have to step out by faith and find a way to add a staff member that's going to help you grow your church. So we staff to grow. But if you have your priorities reversed, meaning you think facilities is the most important, then programs, then staff, you'll probably keep your church from growing. And so you reverse that, and you make the staff personnel, then programs, then your property as the key priorities. We all have to establish priorities in our ministries as we set our budgets, and as we hire our personnel, and as we care and add additional property. How does churches allow change to take place? As I would tell you, and as I've told you before in our webinars, people respond to change usually in one of 5 groups. There are the instant adapters who you think it and speak it, and they're right there with you. There are the early adapters who need less time to think through it. Then the third group, the average adapters, are those who hear it and may take a period of time, but they come around. Then you have the fourth group, which are the late adapters. They're having to be convinced by the regular group in the middle, which is your largest group of adapters, to change. And then the fifth adapters are the never adapters. So how does change take place in church? Well, here's a rule, just as we begin talking about it, before we give you the 3 different church sizes. Don't push your church, lead them. Think of a chain or a rope laying on the ground, and you want to move that rope from one part of the floor to the next. Do you push it, or do you pull it? And the answer is, if you want to get it there, you take and you pull a big old rope or a big chain. You don't expect to go to the back side of it and push it to get it where it needs to go. It just bunches up on you. So as you do this, number 2, change is inevitable, but growth is intentional. Churches are no different than our bodies. Our bodies, when we're born, are changing until we die. And part of that brings about growth so that we can be productive. So change is inevitable, but growth is intentional. It's been said there's at least 3 levels of change for church. There's minor change, where small modification in areas of ministry come about. For instance, it would be good to look at a small change, a minor change, would be how people are treating visitors coming to your church. And then there's the second level of change, major change. And this is where you make big modifications which will change the perspective or the focus of your church. And then the third change is transformational. It's radical change in belief and practice, such as externally focused when originally you were internally focused. For your small church, medium church, or large church to change, there's got to be more than just minor change, which may send a small ripple through your church, to major change, which more people are becoming aware of, to transformational change, which means in character and spiritual change has happened in your people, where now they're more like Christ and thinking more biblically. And often in a church that's going to grow, it means you've got to be externally focused, not just internally focused. So let me share with you 5 opportunities for change. Gary McIntosh mentions these in his book, One Size Doesn't Fit All, but they're not just Gary would tell you these things. Number 1 opportunity for change is some kind of crisis. Something has happened, and now your people are willing to make a change. Number 2, pastoral change. You've got a change of pastors coming in and out. Number 3, during the budget preparation, where you're creating and deciding on where you're going to spend your money for the year. Number 4, spiritual renewal, revival. You have revival services, or you see God bring about revival in your church, and it's an opportunity for you to make some needed changings, because people's reception, remember I talked about the 5 levels of adapters? They're responding in different things. Opportunities for change comes about, and different people will respond to that opportunity. So you've got response to crisis, a change in leadership, preparation of finances and budget, spiritual renewal, revival, and then the 5th one is planning. During your planning time is an opportunity for you to bring about, hey, could we add a ministry or change the way we're doing something, or delete a ministry altogether? The heart of the change process that goes about in any church usually comes about when there is a new vision for the future. So a new vision from God leads the way for change. So let me give you 6 things concerning change. You ought to provide as a leader God's vision. And usually God gives his vision to the key person in the church. And then it is disseminated throughout the leadership and both the official leadership, the key stakeholders in your church, the directors of ministries, your paid staff and support staff if you have it, and then throughout your congregation. And so, Pastor, you've got to discern and walk with God to discern his vision for your ministry, and then cast it in a way that people can catch it and carry it like a virus throughout your congregation. Number 2, lead people to accept the vision. Number 3, identify what has to be done to reach the vision, to achieve the vision. Number 4, simply establish a game plan for reaching the vision, for carrying out the vision. Number 5, set goals. Put a deadline on the goals. Number 6, engage people to carry out the plan to reach the goals. Change and vision are connected together, and the pastor who ignores the need for vision is ignoring the opportunity to grow his people. However you may interpret or translate the scripture in Proverbs that says, without a vision the people perish or wander, you need to decide in your own mind how important vision is, and then lead as a visionary so that others can see what God wants for your ministry and for your community, and what place your church plays in God's economy for your community and for the world, and then be able to communicate it. So how does change take place in the small church? Well, it's going to be from the bottom up, and it's going to be through key people. If you'll remember in our part 1 of this series, we talked about the small church being led by key family or families, and that may be through bloodlines. And so if you're going to bring about change, you've got to lead those people to accept change and to adopt it as their own. Or you're not going to get it done by just standing and declaring it from the pulpit or doing battle with these people, having a power struggle over what's going to happen in the church. For medium-sized churches, it's going to be middle out because you've moved from one family being in control to families or committees being in control. And so it's done through changes taking place through key committees and key teams, depending on how you're put together with your ministry design. And then for the large church, it's going to be top down through key leaders, through the senior pastor, the executive pastor, or different associate and assistant pastors over different ministries. And then also your lay leaders in your board is going to have a part in that. Now, let's move from this to answer the question, how do churches grow? So before we talk about the 3 different sizes and how it is applied to them, let me just run through some things with you about how churches grow. Number 1, church growth is a journey, not a destination. When you have told people, when they come to you and say, I'm just not happy with my job and my marriage, with my church, with my family, in my community, I'm personally just not happy. What do you tell them? Well, I tell them that you don't pursue happiness. You pursue God's will for your life, and along your journey of pursuing His purpose for your life, you're going to stumble upon happiness. So when we talk about church growth, we're not telling you to pursue it. We're telling you that church growth or making disciples, building the kingdom, doing kingdom work, and fulfilling the Great Commission, it's a journey, not just a destination, as though you're going to reach 400 people and think, well, my ministry's done, I've reached this area, and you're going to plateau off. You're going to continue to grow your church as long as you have people to reach with the gospel and to grow up into Ephesians 4, into the fullness of the stature of Christ. You see, pursuing church growth, it doesn't work that way. You get happy on your journey to something else. It's a byproduct of fulfilling God's will. As we pursue our mission, we find our church growing. We never know how much, just like our kids. We don't know how much our kids are going to grow. But we can get some indicators about the bandwidth of our children's potential to grow and our church's potential to grow. So as we honor God and make disciples, we are going to find that our church grows. And number 2, it's going to grow differently from other churches. You may plant new churches, go multi-site, or grow one large church. And so how your church grows and develops may differ from the church literally next door or across the street from you. So let's talk first about small churches. How do they grow? Well, often, historically, small churches have grown attractionally. You remember that we talked about how pastors are perceived, and growing small churches that are growing and reaching people often will be using their pastor, who is a gifted individual and has strong Christ-like character, to use it as an attractional model, because of having 75 people, you're not going to have the potential or the bandwidth to have a lot of programs that a medium or large church will have. But that small church is going to grow through relationships. So number 1 about this, the warm family atmosphere can be used, relationships, to appeal to people outside your church. They'll find a church home where the members love and care for them. So how are you going to build the small church? You are going to build it probably attractionally and missionally through the relationships of the key people in your church. Number 2 about this, the ability to attract new people is connected to the relationships in the church. If those relationships are healthy, then you have an opportunity to grow. And so the unchurched come when invited by loving, Christ-like members. The outreach is relational, just as a small church is relational. The struggle with this model is that it limits the outreach of the church to the relationships in the church. And so we've got to find a way to reach out beyond our circle of friends and family to win the unchurched and win back the dechurched and those that have no connection to our small group of members. And so you've got to find a way to reach outside your four walls and outside the relationships, because every person has a circle of friends or a social network. So find your way for using the social media and the social networking inside of your church. Find a way to reach outside. Number 3, the key for the members to focus their love and care on outsiders that are not connected to the church family. So look to reach more than just their lost friends and family, but to go and spread out into the community. Identify the strengths. Here are some keys. Identify the strengths of your congregation and build on them. How can you translate your strengths into changed lives in your community? How can they help you reach lost people with the gospel? How can they help you assimilate them into your church family? So if you're looking at your relationships, then look at the strengths of your church and help them understand how they can expand outside of just the small group of people that they know personally. So here's a tool for you. Take the following questions and ask them the following questions. Survey your congregation to get their juices flowing and to help you improve and increase your community IQ, what you know about your community. Let's just look at your small church, the small group of people under 200 that you have currently attending your church. Here's a question you can ask them. Number 1, why did you visit the church for the first time? What attracted you? Was it a person coming out, living out their faith in your workplace or next door to you at home or in the Boy Scouts or at the YMCA or some other avenue, music and arts? Why did you visit the church for the first time? Did you receive an invitation from a friend or coworker, family member? Number 2, where did you make first contact with the church? How did you even find out that it existed? Number 3, what persuaded you to visit for the first time? You might have got an invitation, but what persuaded you to say yes to that invitation? Was it the warmth of a person? Was it a postcard you got in the mail? Was it something you saw on Facebook? What did it? Number 4, what persuaded you to return for the second visit? Number 5, what persuaded you to join or become a regular attender? Number 6, what is special about your congregation? Number 7, what might a new person gain by being with your congregation? Number 8, what might your congregation gain by inviting friends to be with you during worship and other activities? What are they going to get out of it? What argument could you make? For instance, for a number of years, we used an annual picnic, but we structured it to target a certain group. And we were a small church when we started it and grew into a medium church and then into a large church using this one tool as an annual event. And we had several annual events. But we had a picnic. And in that picnic, we had a pig roast, and we barbecued and cooked all night long. So on Friday night, we rented the park. It had a pavilion. We brought in families, and as it grew through the years, it went from just 3 or 4 families coming to cook the food all night long, to a dozen families being there at the shelter, camping out in tents, coming and staying, and it was an annual event. Well, guess what? Lots of people in Greenville, South Carolina and Greer, South Carolina love barbecue. And so we barbecue. We did steaks Friday night, hot dogs and hamburgers for all the families that were there and those that stayed overnight and all the way into the next day. And come lunchtime the next day, we had brought in food from our families, and we had bought the meat. We had brought in the huge grills. We had barbecue chicken, barbecue pork and beans, and corn on the cob, and every kind of dessert you could imagine, and garlic toast. I mean, we laid out a feast. And then we had our special kind of music that we used, and it was attractional to the people who came. Well, guess what? When you're putting that out everywhere to bring in, it's what I call a suckers, and it sucked in families who were on the fringes of our church, or that we were reaching in to the lives of people in the workplace, in the marketplace, in the neighborhoods, and our people used it as an opportunity to bring something so that we had activities for every age group. We had it set up where people could sit in small groups and talk and eat, and then we put on a meal and a program that was second to none. I even had a guy come as a comedian to do it one year. And so we provided special music, and he served as a Christian comedian. And so as we did this, I took a small church and I found a way to work through the relationships, teaching our people to be attractional and missional, to live out their faith daily with others. And so as you go through this, you want to do this. Number 9, do you really want new people in your congregation? You need to ask your people that. They need to be confronted. Bring them to a watershed moment spiritually of finding out and discerning if really they just don't want new people there. So as a small church, that may be a problem you have to deal with. Number 10, how do you invite your friends to visit your congregation? Ask your people that. Find out how they would do it, what they've tried that's worked and not worked, and then disciple them. Equip them with it. Number 11, are newcomers welcome at your church? Number 12, are you ready to invite people? Ask them, are you prepared to invite people to our church? You may find that they say, our facilities, just kind of embarrassed by them, or I'm embarrassed by the way we worship, or the way what we have to offer. You really need to get to the roots of this, because they may be the very people who help you improve your situation. Number 13 is the last question in this survey, and we've put this in the resources for you, so you can scroll down later and download it, and then just make your own survey, tailor it to your church. But here's the last one. How can you begin to share your love with friends outside your church family? I would tell you to use the survey to bring people to a decision point. Are they going to reach out to the unchurched and dechurched in your community or not? And the set of new people attending your services will spawn the need for new programs to meet your needs. And so as a small church, you'll build some excitement when you see that there are needs that you're capable of meeting. And you can look at the community IQ document we've given you that's giving you a list of questions to help you discern and locate, identify where your church with your strengths can meet certain needs in your community to use as tools to preach the gospel, to fulfill the Great Commission. Now, let me give you something about programs as a small church and a medium church for you to catch this. The Pareto principle is an Italian economist who developed this some years ago. The 80-20 principle, you need to apply it to your programs, your people, and what profits your church. In other words, what helps you reach people and fulfill your mission. Here's the rule. 20% of the effort you make through your programs, through your systems, through your events and activities, 20% of your effort brings 80% of the results you get. 30% of your efforts brings about 15% of the results you see by your ministry. And then 50% of your efforts brings about 5% of the results you will see. So if you don't accurately measure the success of your programs and then adjust and adapt your church, you will not see you reach your growth potential. Are you catching this? Because this is pretty important for you as a ministry architect, as your church's architect, leader, and manager. So you have to measure effectiveness, then adjust your efforts so that the 20% are producing the 80% of your results. Focus and give money and personnel to the 20% that's producing the 80% results. Take a look at where your newcomers are coming from and target the efforts that bring them there. You might even consider, I'm not telling you to dogmatically do this, but you may look at the 50% that's bringing only 5% and look to reduce it or remove that and put those resources toward the 20% that's producing 80% of your results. Put 80% of your resources in those programs and people that are producing 80% of your results. Go measure. Reshaping the culture of your church may best happen when it is small. So while you're a small church, cultivate an environment that fulfills the Great Commission in the posture of the Great Commandment. You've got a great opportunity, small pastor or pastor of a small church, to reshape and reset what's the priorities and the programs and the personnel of your church while it is small so that it will help you grow into a medium-sized church. So as we look at this, let's step then into medium churches. In medium churches, it's usually run and set up by programs because as a small church, you started adding them as you reached new people to grow you from 100 people to 250 people. And so it's set up by programs. And through key ministries, you're going to grow your church. One or two key programming models are usually developed and perfected that will reach the unchurched, the lost, and bring them into the church. And so where you were focusing on relationships when you were a small church, now you're going to use programs that meet felt needs in your church and in your community to help you develop those. And there probably will be just a couple of key programs that you're running that is bringing 80% of the results of your growth. So you need to determine where is our growth happening. So you want to make certain that you properly design and then adjust and adapt your existing programs and then look for new programs to add so that you're pulling in and sucking in more new people. So as you have events, activities, and programs, you're going to build your church through the key ministries that you've got. With large churches, it probably is your branding. Gary McIntosh calls it proclamation, but your branding is what people know you to be. And so through multiple means now, a large church has the ability to reach more people because you have more people in your church, but you're able to get the message out. So this branding model, you're taking the programs of a medium-sized church and you're going to put it on steroids. And you're going to use the attractional and missional approach of a small church that you have built into your church, and you are going to use them to reach more new people. And you're going to assimilate them into the church. And so the large church has more resources and gifted people to generate opportunities to reach more people than a medium and small church does. And so you're going to use word of mouth, and you're going to use social media, and through your people, you're going to help more of your people reach out to more people in the community to reach them. And so they're going to tell their friends, and their friends are going to tell others, and it's going to grow exponentially. So while each size church has some aspect of each model in it, attractional and program and branding, the church needs to play to their strengths, not their weaknesses. Identifying how Christ wants to use your congregation to fulfill the Great Commission so that you're doing the kingdom work that God has called you to do. This is crucial. It's critical to your church growing from large to larger and to eventually what you would call, we call mega church. And so if you want to continue and you have more people in your community to reach, you continue reaching out to them and reaching out to them and reaching out to them. But understand the nature of the size church you're in and what traditionally has been the nature of small churches is that it's done through relationships. With medium churches, it's new programs to meet the needs of people who will come to you because they have a spiritual need, a physical need, a relational need, and you're going to find a program, event, an activity that meets that need. And with the large church, you're using your programs and your relationships and your branding where you're able to send it out to communicate to people. So let's go to the next question. The ninth question is, what are the obstacles to growth? For small churches, there are 5 that I'll list, and these are not original with me. Gary McIntosh puts them in a different way. But as we go through these, and you look at these, and you measure whether or not these are an obstacle to you as a small church, if these aren't the ones hindering you, have you identified the obstacles that are keeping your church from reaching more people with the gospel? So let's talk about them. The first one is a poor self-image. Self-perception, where your people feel that they just don't believe that they have anything to offer lost people, the unchurched. It's been reported that growing churches believe they have something life-changing to offer people in their communities. This belief energizes them to share the gospel with others and to invite them to one of their services. Small churches that are declining often feel they do not have anything of significance to offer the lost people, the unchurched people in their community. This poor self-image causes them to retreat into their shell and fail to reach out to others. They become isolated and insulated. Let me encourage you to initiate conversations with your church leaders and your ministry leaders and the volunteer labor force in your church to determine their image of your church. You've got to address it. So here's another survey you can give to your church leaders and your volunteer workforce. Ask them how they feel about your church. Do they feel good about it, fair about it, poor about it? The very self-image, what it has to offer. Ask them, do they want others to experience your church, your services, both worship services and educational services and activities and events? Number 3, ask them if they feel like people would want to get involved in the life of your church. Number 4, do you ask them if they look more to the future of your ministry or at the past of your ministry? Number 5, is your congregation and your key leaders willing to take reasonable risk to reach more people? Number 6, ask your congregation, your leadership, if they take pride in maintaining your church facilities and campus. How your church looks and the impression it gives, is that important that it be done with the spirit of excellence? Number 7, do they believe your church is something special, that you would want them there? Look at our country, the United States. People want to migrate to the United States. We have immigrants coming in legally and illegally because of what we have to offer here in our country. Well, when you look at your church, are they knocking down the doors to get in? Does your church family believe it has something to offer the lost there in your community? And do they want to invite them in? Number 8, Is your church leaders, your congregation, are they constantly affirmed by you and your leaders? Number 9, have you set high standards for excellence in everything you do in the church? And number 10, ask your congregation if they have a vision for the future of your ministry. If they have a poor self-image, it might come out by these surveys, by these questions. Now, I'll give these to you, but you can make up your own questions to hand out. And you can use a tool like SurveyMonkey to send to every one of them. And so the first obstacle to growth is a poor self-image. The second one that we'll talk about is a poor outreach effort. For small churches, one of the obstacles to growth is that they don't have a strong outreach into the community. Small churches are relational in nature, and the unchurched have characteristically found acceptance and help from the intimate settings found in smaller congregations. But if you have a poor outreach process, a program, weak events or non-existing events, where you're giving your people the tools and the opportunities to reach out, then you're likely not going to grow. Gary McIntosh suggests 3 areas of ministry that must be developed to overcome this obstacle to reaching your community for Christ. Number 1 is a sense of mission. They've got to believe in the mission and buy into it. Number 2 is a sense of urgency, that souls are at stake, and they must, with urgency, get the message out. And number 3 is an open fellowship that accepts and receives first-time visitors in to make them feel a part of your church family. That's a small church. When you examine and evaluate the posture of yourself and your congregation, what do you find? Are they shrinking from their responsibility to fulfill the Great Commission? Because their thinking's just wrong. So let me encourage you to create a game plan for developing the 3 areas above: a sense of mission, a sense of urgency, and an open fellowship, so that you can begin to overcome the obstacle, which is very common to small churches, and that is they have a poor outreach program. Number 3, the third obstacle for growth in small churches and reaching lost people with the gospel is poor systems of programming. If people would come and visit but would not return because you didn't have a developed children's ministry or something organized well enough for the teens or for someone in an older age group, look at your programs. And if you're doing what you've got, if you're doing it poorly, you could say, well, we don't have all the things a large church does. Well, of course you don't. You're a small church of 75 to 150 people, under 200 people. But what things you do offer, are you strong at them? Do you do them with excellence? And are they effectively getting people there and keeping people there? Are they finding Christ there and help for them in their journey with Christ, in their relationship with Christ? So how are you going to fix a weak program? Well, here are 4 suggestions, 4 steps. Number 1, I would make every effort to pray the right people to your church. It may be gifted people that can help you develop your programming, or they may be willing to invest themselves in your ministry in spite of your programming. So you need to pray that God would send you people in spite of your weak programming, because those key people, secondly, can help you create a game plan to address your programming needs, help you evaluate your congregation and community, and look for ways to connect with them. So you want to give them what they need, but also what they perceive they need, so that you can gain an opportunity to minister to them. So how can you serve your community and reach out to minister to them? You may find that as an avenue, a pathway to sharing the gospel with them, sharing and helping them see their need of Christ. Third step, examine your budget and look for ways to reuse your money more effectively. Redirect it to that one program that you're focusing on that you believe is going to generate 80% of your outreach results. And fourthly, resist the temptation to cut the budget to the very quick in order to save money. One of the things that churches do when their ministry is shrinking or it's plateaued is they get frightened and they start to withdraw like a turtle into a shell. And when you do that, if you don't spend the money and take some risk and choose to put the money into the right efforts, into the right programs and systems, you're going to continue to decline. It's going to be self-prophesying. So you want to apply solid stewardship principles to your corporate finances. It's not going to be easy to overcome this obstacle, but you need to develop, as a part of your culture, a spirit of excellence. Let's go to the next obstacle for small churches, and that is negative momentum. Downward momentum, negative momentum. Instead of positive momentum where you're moving forward and growing, people are growing spiritually and you're reaching new people, and there's a sense and a culture and an expectation of God working there, you end up with negative momentum. If you understand that a small church often retreats to themselves, which isolates and insulates them from the very people they are called to reach, then they go into survival mode and cut back in the funding and in other resources and involvement. The tendency is to hide our talents in the ground for safekeeping. Instead, you need to design and develop a ministry plan to remove the obstacles over the next year. Identify the obstacles, agree on solutions, and action steps. Then you need to develop action steps that will let you move forward. So you need to develop a game plan, agree on the solutions, develop action steps, and then stick to your plan. Instead of sticking your head in the sand, stick your head in expecting God to work and move forward. So as you look at negative momentum, you've got to reverse that momentum. And it's probably not going to be easy. A good resource for you, and it's a part, if you scroll down, you'll see it there, taking your church to the next level. In this book, he describes in detail how to take your church from where it is to where God wants it to be. And part of this is at some point in most of our small churches, we're going to be challenged with reversing the negative momentum into positive momentum. So if you've got a downward pull, like water where you pull the plug in your sink and the water is swirling and going down into the drain, it seems to pull everything with it. You've got to fix this by reversing the momentum. And then the next obstacle to growth is being internally focused. An ingrown fellowship. It's where the longer a church stays small, the stronger the tendency is to develop a structure of us four and no more. Your fellowship and networking becomes restricted to the existing group in your church, and reaching out is not a part of your culture. You've just been at it too long. My wife and I regularly visit churches that have an aging congregation as we do our first impressions audit and as we do our research. They've been small for so long and failed to absorb new people into their congregation that it is just self-directing, that their congregation is going to last for another generation until those gray hairs are gone because they're not taking anyone new in. So Gary McIntosh says that there are 3 indicators that a church is ingrown. And here's what he says. If more than 50% of the congregation have been there for more than 12 years, you've got probably an ingrown congregation that is internally focused. Number 2, more than 33% of the governing board are related to the main families in the church. Remember what we said earlier about who makes decisions in part 1 of this series? Number 3, fewer than 10% of the congregation have started attending the church in the last year. And so you may find this as an obstacle because people's expectations have grown and become complacent with, well, we just can't reach our community. Now, with medium-sized churches, you've got another set of challenges, obstacles to growth. The first one is if your church is growing, you've grown from a small church to a large church, particularly if you've grown quickly, you're going to find an obstacle for that is the fact that you have inadequate facilities. And what are you going to do about that? If your facilities and campus cannot handle the new growth, let me urge you to research the bandwidth of your campus. We can help you with that. But as you look at this, you have to look at every cubic square inch of your buildings and every inch of your property, particularly your parking, to determine how many people you can get onto your campus at one time. Number two, not only will you need to address the need for more space, you will need to address the need for more money. Because as your space reaches its 80% capacity, so you've got people in your worship service, in your nurseries, in your classrooms, and so forth, and they're 80% full. The norm is that you plateau in your growth. So if you want to reach more people, then you're going to have to use your space more efficiently. So you've got to do something about that, which leads to the next challenge for a church, and that is inadequate staff. So what's happened here as you've grown is now you're having growing pains. We have 2 sons that are grown men, married, and have their own families. But as they were teenagers, they went through this immense growth spurt, and man, we had to keep buying shoes and buying pants and buying shirts, and because they were growing. Well, that growth spurt plateaued as they reached 18, 19 years of age. We said, well, all right, one's going to be 6'3", one's going to be 6'2", and they're going to be this type body style, and, it plateaued off. Well, the problem with that, with the church, is when you have growth, if you don't keep up with it and plan ahead, you're not going to be able to use and have a game plan to use your facilities or add facilities or sell and relocate or address it in some way. And then you're going to find that you don't have adequate leadership to lead and to develop those programs you need, the processes, the systems to minister to people. And so growing church, it can just overrun you where you think, honey, you tell your wife, I can't take care of any more people. And you've got to prepare for it. One of the obstacles to growth is a lack of adequate facilities, and you don't have enough staff or the right staff to care for your ministry. The third one is inadequate funding. Inadequate funding means you haven't allocated your money correctly, or you've reached a lot of new people and they haven't been giving to you financially, and it can hinder your ability to hire more staff or to do something with your facility. I've included in this, with inadequate facilities, a sheet that gives you options for worship services. It's just 7 or 8 or 9 ways for you to consider using your facility better, making it more efficient, so that if you can only get 300 people on your campus and you've got 450 people and you want to reach 550 or 650 people, and you have the potential to do that on your campus, you may have to go to multiple services. Or you may have to find an off-campus location for a group of people to come worship. Or you may have parking but not room in your facility, so now you've got them worshiping simultaneously in your auditorium, your sanctuary if you call it that, but your worship space, and in your recreation or fellowship hall, or in a large room. And so there's all these different options you can take to get past the obstacle of growth. What I did, and I've seen done, when it comes to inadequate staff, is that I trained people and had volunteer leaders who weren't paid staff, or they were part-time. And we found a way to make our funding expand and work within our context. You've got to do the same. Another one is inadequate ministry design. Your structure, the way that you have set up your ministry, is that if you have an underdeveloped management structure for caring for all these people, for leading and managing them, it's going to hinder your ability to reach more people. So some of the challenges that you may find you face when it comes to your ministry design is that you've just got a lack of planning and coordination, ineffective time management for you and your staff, poor use of volunteers, poor budget control. So learning to lead and manage a growing church can be a challenge. I certainly have experienced that as our church grew. There are resources to help you prepare to lead your church into the future. So look at some of the books that we've given you here on your laptop, your computer screen, and scroll down and click on them when you're done with this webinar. And you'll find some help there. The fifth obstacle is that of failure to adapt and adjust your personnel, your places, your people, your programs. And you've got more people, and it's creating more demand on you, and it makes your ministry more complex. And now you've got to do something. You've got to adjust and adapt. So get ahead of the curve here. And as you ask God to entrust you with more souls, and you're planting the seed of the gospel, of God's word, and you're weeding and fertilizing and tilling and then waiting for the harvest, as you do that, be thinking about how you're going to take your church from a small church to a medium church and then to a large church who also faces more obstacles. In this, the first one that a large church will face is that of poor assimilation process. How do you may be good at getting first-time visitors there, but you're not good at keeping them. Secondly, failure to redesign your organizational structure. And so you don't end up taking care of them by restructuring the way that you do ministry. It probably is going to have to change. You're going to have to change how you run your programs and major events because you've got more people. You're going to have to continue to divide them and find new ways to minister to them. You're going to have to redesign your organization. Another obstacle is poor communication. Now listen, there is in social media what I call white noise, and it's where you've got all these people clamoring and desiring the attention of your church family, and you've got to navigate your way through this so that you can be heard. But we have more avenues, and technology has provided more methods for us to communicate. So you ought to be communicating, yes, from your pulpit, but you ought to have at least 5 other channels where you can communicate to your people. Use technology, but use word of mouth. And just when you think people are ready to have a mutiny because they're tired of hearing you say the same thing over and over again, you probably are just then getting through to them. Because what's a priority to you as the pastor and as the leader of the church and the manager of the church? It's not the priority for your church family. They're focused on their families and their jobs and maybe some other things that are going on. Here's another obstacle. Your church, if it's large, has been around for some time, and maybe you've lost your way with your vision, or maybe you've reached your vision, your destination, and now it's time for you to find out what is God's new vision for your ministry. But large churches will characteristically peter out. They'll stall out because they lose the focus on a urgent vision that God has called your church for a preferred future to a new destination, and they've maybe lost their way, or you need to renew the vision. I would suggest you take time to study Andy Stanley's 2 books. One is called Visioneering, and the other is Making Vision Stick. Here's another one. You say, well, this doesn't sound right. But as your congregation has grown, it can become a challenge to take care of your membership. Now, you've got to help people, too, understand when you've grown from a small church where you as the pastor could get to everybody's house, everybody at the hospital. If you're going to grow into a medium-sized church, you've got to disperse that to staff and key leaders. In a large church, you certainly had better have smaller groups of people with lay people meeting the needs, because you just can't care for everyone's needs. There's no way for you to do that. But you've got to cultivate in your people the mindset that they're being cared and loved for and watched after by lay people. Because in a large church, if you have 5 or 6 pastors on staff, depending upon how large a church you are, you still can't get to that 800 people and care for everything. You've got to have a lot of shepherds developed by the lay people in your church. So as you look at these things, and let's move to what are growth strategies. Well, in small churches, and let me set your thinking, here's the rule. We cannot cause growth. We can only create a climate in which growth can take place. Think for a moment of farming. I have family who are farmers. Both sides of my parents' family were farmers. And as they did, they secured land through either leasing it and buying it, and they plowed the land, treated the land, they planted, they weeded, they watered, they fertilized, they sprayed. They did everything they were supposed to do as stewards of those fields and their potential crops. But it is God that brings the harvest. He ripens the hearts of people to be receptive to the gospel, and he births them. So as you see that, though, we have to steward our ministries, our resources, our personnel, everything around us, so that when we're plowing and planting and weeding and watering and fertilizing and spraying and plucking and carrying, we're ready for the harvest. Every church has to find the formula in their ministry design that will work in their situation. There's some trial and error. What works around the corner for one church may not work for your church. So you ought to work smarter, not harder. So here are some growth strategies that you need to look at. And the first one is to renew your purpose. They ought to have a renewed sense of purpose. Start new ministries as a small church. Again, community intelligence. Number 3, develop a culture of outreach. If they've grown accustomed to just us 4 and no more, you've got to battle that. Number 4, celebrate victories. Celebrate the victories. Talk about it. Rejoice in it. Thank God for it in your worship services, through your newsletter, through your emails, through a blog post, and on and on. Start new groups and classes. Involve new people. Give them a place to land. Give them a place to land and get them incorporated into your church. Assimilation. And then incorporate new people. So as you start new groups and classes, you're going to give new people an opportunity, a place to land. Now let's move to medium-sized churches. What are some growth strategies? Now you can develop your own. I'm just priming the pump here and telling you characteristically what the nature of a medium church is. If they're going to grow, they've got to develop their distinct identity. They've got to add staff. They've got to use facilities to full capacity. They've got to offer multiple worship services so that you can continue to grow. So staffing and full use of facilities are key. You've got to create a long-range plan. Where are you going long range? Example here, and we deal with this in our other series that we deal with in Preparing to Build, is that if you know you're going to build in the next 5 to 10 years, why not begin conditioning your people to accept the future payment on new property in a new building, or adding a wing to your facility by breaking down a payment into 5 to 10 years and adding that to your general fund, so that they get used to supporting it, and each year add another fifth, say, if you're looking 5 years out. That's a part of the long-range plan. But you better have one about the use of your facilities and manage what you've got. And then you want to improve the quality of your ministry. You want to do it with excellence. You want to be better at making disciples. Now let's go to large churches. And this is the last question and the last point. Renew your vision. Design and assimilation. Streamline procedures. You look at the book Simple Church by Tom Rainer. as they went through and looked at large churches, they had become too convoluted, too complex, and you had people in all different tracks, not on the same track. They weren't in alignment and attunement. And each person in these large churches, each person that were involved in different ministries had a tendency to watch only after their ministry. So you want to streamline your procedures, offer need-based events, and adjust leadership structure. You go through this to increase the number of small groups. Here are growth strategies. Your vision is key. Assimilating new people into the membership of your church and into service opportunities. Streamline your procedures so you don't get so complex and bogged down. Look for other need-based events that you can offer to expand reaching to more people groups, more tribes. Adjust your leadership structure so that you can make adjustments quickly, because large ships don't turn on a dime. You better look at how you're structured. It's one of the key things that prohibits growth in churches. And then you want to increase numbers of small groups. Well, let me give you just a quick case study. So if you're going to go on this journey and take a small church to a large church, there are three things you're going to have to do. In phase 1, you're going to have to add. In phase 2, you're going to have to divide. In phase 3, you're going to have to multiply. But here's how I broke it down. In phase 1, you're going to add by exemplify by reaching new people yourself. You want to give them an example. Number 2, you want to identify the 20% that are producing and extend an invitation to them to join you reaching new people. Number 3, you want to preach and teach the values of love, care, and concern, and openness to new members. Number 4, you want to blend the lives of your people together in ways that will help them know each other instead of just knowing about each other. We used Dinners for Six while we were a small church so that people would spend time together. Dinners for Six is an old process that can be used in a new way in your ministry today. Number 6, award, reward, and acknowledge. Soul winning is a key virtue of every believer. So if they want to be an example of the believer, make bringing people to Christ, soul winning, a key virtue. Number 7, these things build a foundation for second phase. And the second phase, after you've added these things to your church, is to divide. As the auditorium fills up with new people, to maximize your ministry space, use one or two of the options I've given you and the worship service options to expand your ministry. You're going to divide your congregation into multiple services. Prepare over time, number 2, for the option you select. Going to multiple services will concern your family, a small church family, because they don't want to split and lose fellowship. They want that small family feel. Well, you're going to have to change their thinking and help them accept the fact that you need to do this. Number 3, create fellowship times and areas to join the multiple services together. So you may have 2 Sunday morning services, but in between them is small groups or one Sunday school or a food and fellowship time. And number 4, you are splitting the one cell into multiple cells. Help them see the value and how it will work. And now we're to phase 3. As I give you this case study, now you're growing into a large church. Small church is adding, a medium church is dividing, and a large church is multiplying the different groups, classes, and programs and ministries to reach more unchurched people and to meet the needs of those in your assembly, in your church. Well, this is how it looks, is you're going to go from a small church to a medium church to a large church. Here is how it generally works historically with our growth and obstacles to growth, all these questions that we've answered. And so as phase 1, you want to add. In phase 2, you want to divide. And in phase 3, you want to multiply so that you get your own game plan about how it's going to work in your context. Now, I don't want you to be mechanical in this. I want you to depend entirely on the Lord, so that you're walking with him as you lead your church from a small church to a large church. Well, I'm Marshall Shannon, your ministry design coach. You can reach me at this email address or either one of these phone numbers, and I'll be more than happy to help you. Trust the Lord will help you absorb the nature and characteristics of churches when they're small, medium, and large. Please don't hesitate to comment at the comment section. Ask your questions. We'll be happy to answer those questions and come back to you with it.